Cool. Hello, everyone. My name is Wesley. This is annoying. This is Wu Can Cook. Today we're cooking through a PF Chang's hack that I had written for the YouTube channel a couple of days ago, a couple of weeks ago. That came out on the YouTube channel last Friday. So if you're looking for that stuff, those are out every Friday. We came out with this recipe last Friday, and every Friday we've got a new thing going. This one is a part of a series that we've been doing where we've been recreating a lot of stuff from like Chinese American, like really classic or really iconic Chinese American cuisine. So we do a lot of PF Chang's, Panda Express, stuff like that, and kind of taking a look at what those dishes would look like without their like American qualities, which I always find really interesting because a lot of times the things that come from those cuisines are not really Chinese at all. They're basically just American food. So that's always really interesting to me because we're basically just jamming a whole bunch of Chinese things into a dish that is not really Chinese at all. So if you have any questions for me, feel free to drop your questions in the chat and we'll see if I know anything. I know lots of stuff about, I don't know everything about Singapore noodles, but I know lots of stuff. As always, if you're looking for those recipe videos, they live over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel that's at the bottom of the screen. And if you're watching on YouTube, it's the channel that you're already on. So you're there. Good job. Cool. So I'm running a little late today, so we're all over the place. But we're starting off with our garlic and ginger here, which we're doubling today. So if you're following the original recipe, that would be 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic. Today we're doubling, so this is going to be 8 cloves of garlic. By the way, so one thing that I found particularly interesting about Singapore noodles, lots of people have been asking about this too since we released the recipe, is why is it called Singapore noodles, which I thought was really funny, because it has no connection whatsoever to Singapore. Which, if you are familiar with Singapore street food, you might notice because it looks nothing like the things that you would get in Singapore, or like at the, so Singapore is famous for its hawker fare, the hawker street food, the hawker center, where you get all of this like really famous, that's where like when you go to Singapore and you can get Michelin star rated food from street vendors, that's where it's at the hawker center. This dish looks nothing like those things because it has no connection whatsoever to Singapore, and it actually comes from China. And it has more of its origins in Hong Kong food, which I thought was really interesting for all kinds of reasons. First of all, why is it called Singapore Street Noodles and not Hong Kong noodles? Which on its own is this whole other thing because Hong Kong noodles are a whole different thing, which is very weird. So you'll notice, by the way, that it's assembled, other than the use of vermicelli, it looks a whole lot like a chow mein, and that's because I think that it was more or less assembled with the mindset that it's being served to people who are eating chow mein, which is to say, it's Chinese American cuisine, which is really cool and interesting and strange and weird. So you'll notice if you're following along, we did a couple of chow mein recipes. And one chow mein recipe and one lo mein recipe, which is really interesting. So you'll notice that it's going to start looking a lot like all of those recipes because that's where it comes from. It's the same cuisine. So the thing that distinguishes it as in the style of a Hong Kong noodle versus in the style of like say like a Shanghainese noodle or a Singapore noodle or something like that, is that a Hong Kong noodle or a chow mein noodle, I should say more specifically, is iconically seasoned. The noodles are seasoned in a very specific way, and that is basically the noodles themselves are seasoned. So in chow mein, a lot of times you might see say like the noodles will be marinated in like dark soy sauce and sesame oil. That's how we did our chow mein a little while back. Other things like that you might see like say like hoisin sauce, stuff like that, anything to impart a unique flavor to the noodles themselves. Today we're going to do that in our Singapore noodle with curry powder, which is what the noodle is sort of like iconically known for, and that's to me why it looks more like a chow mein than it does anything that I've ever had from Singaporean cuisine. So anyway, so that's that tangent. If you're interested, I talked a lot more about that in the YouTube video too. So, because I thought it was really interesting and weird and quirky and this weird stuff that happens with Chinese food. So next up, this is about an inch, about 2 inches of ginger. If you're not doubling the recipe, this should be about 1 inch of ginger. What's really annoying about ginger, as you notice that I just chopped off that weird nook, and that's because ginger has all of these weird curves and edges that make it really, really difficult to peel. So one thing that I like doing is using a spoon for this purpose, because you can kind of get around those weird nooks and crannies like this. The other thing that I'll usually do is just chop it off. If it's too much of a pain in the ass to get to, it's not that big of a deal. Ginger is cheap, so I usually just chop it off if I don't feel like working around it, especially if it looks like it's probably a little bit moldy anyway. So for our ginger, we're going to do our fine mince here by starting with a dice. Like so. And then we're going to go through for our fine mince by running our knife through it. And again, I always say this, but I feel like it requires reiterating. And fine mince is really just about persistence. Also helps to have a really, really sharp knife. But the real key to getting a good fine mince is just be persistent and run your knife through it and kind of stop whenever you feel like you're losing hope. You can also, by the way, if you don't like doing fine minces, throw this stuff into a food processor. That's how we do it when we're cooking in really large volumes at our pop-up. It's a really good shortcut. The only problem is that you also have to wash your food processor when you're done, whereas it's a lot easier to clean the knife. So, not a shortcut that I would recommend doing unless you're doing a lot of foods. So when we do it in the pop-up, that's usually about 1.5 pounds of ginger on a light day. Which is way more ginger than I feel like mincing. So. Alright, so there's our garlic and ginger. We're going to set these aside. You'll often see me refer to these two elements as our aromatics, specifically because they are aromatic. And we're going to derive some very nice aromatic flavor from them, which means that they're going to head into our wok fry very, very first, or at least as we get to the wok fry portion, they're going to be the first thing that gets into our wok. And then we're going to bloom out some really, really nice fragrant qualities from them in our initial wok fry. You could run in the street. Yeah, that's cool. Yes, pretend to eat what I'm eating. Please do. Cool. So the other thing that I noted about the Singapore street noodle, at least the one that we're inspired by, as we're sort of like referencing the one that comes from PF Chang's. The thing that I noticed about the version found at PF Chang's, by the way, a Singapore street noodle comes from all over. It's not an invention by PF Chang's. It's all over American Chinese cuisine all the time. But the one that I found at PF Chang's, the thing that is most American to me about that dish is that it just contains just the sheer volume of things that are in it is insane. There's like 10 different vegetables in this dish in the PF Chang's version. It has like, there's tomatoes, there's cilantro, there's carrots, onions, there's green onions, there's garlic, what else? There's a bell pepper, I forget what else. There's just so many vegetables in this dish, which to me, that's the American thing about it, is just the absolute insane amount of food that goes in it, which is just about the most American thing that you can do. So for our version today, I actually almost fit almost all of the things that are supposed to go in it in the original recipe. I think the only thing that I left out were the tomatoes, because you can't really find tomatoes in California right now, because they're out of season. I guess you can find tomatoes, but they're not going to be very good tomatoes. So I left those out, but everything else was in our original. Today, I'm going to leave a whole bunch of those things out because I don't think that you need them. I think that it's overkill, and I think it's also not really how you would traditionally see a Singapore noodle. I also just chopped this bell pepper wrong, but that's okay. It's also just not how you would see like a more traditionally like Singapore noodle. So I'm gonna cut a few things out. Mainly the number one thing to me that absolutely does not need to be in this dish is the presence of cabbage, which to me, cabbage, even at its very, very best, is always going to be a filler ingredient. It doesn't impart a lot of flavor, doesn't really do much in texture. It's really just there to kind of like fill out a dish. I'll throw it into stir fries all the time if I'm short of vegetables. So I'm like doing a vegetable stir fry and I'm missing like a whole bunch of the things, I might throw a little bit of cabbage in because it's just going to sort of fill out the dish a lot. That's what kind of like makes it absolutely insane that they include it in a dish that already has 10 vegetables in it. That's so unnecessary. So we're going to leave that out. I'm also going to leave out the cherry tomatoes because, again, you can't really find cherry tomatoes in California right now. If you want good cherry tomatoes, I should say. So we're going to leave those out, and then the last thing I'm going to leave out are the carrots because I just don't think that you need that much vegetables in stir fry. Nobody does. It's insane. Americans need their veggies. Yeah, I guess that's true. So Americans do need their veggies, but you don't need that many things. There's just so many things. There's also chicken and prawns in it, so there's two different kinds of proteins. Don't forget that there's also noodles in it. Then you have cilantro, carrots, cherry tomatoes, bell peppers, onions, all of that garlic. Oh, it's just so many things, and it's just, to me, it's just so unnecessary. So my camera just fell. Sorry, guys. All the technical difficulties today. If anybody's wondering, this camera, it's pinned to the top of my cabinet. That's why sometimes it falls. It's because this is a very, very heavy camera, and it's being propped up by a gorilla pod, which is not really able to hold it. Your Asian mom would disagree. Yeah. But the more that I look at, the more that I have researched it, the more that I've found is that in like a lot of the most of the Singapore noodles, and you could actually think about it then from just like the perspective of running a restaurant. The more common Singapore noodle that you'll see in restaurants is probably contains like maybe 2 vegetables. So you might see like onions, and a bell pepper, and that might be, and then maybe like chicken, and then if you're getting a really, really expensive one, it might have prawns in it. There's no reason to include all of those other vegetables because it would be really, really expensive for the restaurant to do that because you would have to source all of those fresh produce. It's just unnecessary, right? So if you think about it from like a profitability perspective of running a restaurant, there's no reason why you would do that because it's too expensive. But if you are American and you're PF Chang's, it would make a lot of sense. Anyway, next up, sorry for the digression. This is some cilantro. By the way, if you've never peeled cilantro with a fork, this is a really great trick. It is not a perfect trick, so you'll notice that there's still a lot of like stems, like smaller stems hanging onto my cilantro. So we do still have to go back and pick out some of these smaller stems. You don't want that to go into your garnish because cilantro stems are a little bit chewy. Some people don't mind them, so if you don't mind stems, you can throw them in. I find that they're too chewy for a garnish. So it's not a perfect hack, but that one fork trick just did save us like at least 5 minutes because of how long it takes to pick cilantro. She will sneak veggies into any chance that she can get. Yeah, that's my mom too. That's classic Asian mom. All right, so you'll notice there's all of these like smaller stems. Some of these are okay. If they're really, really small like this is okay to eat. It's not going to be that much of a problem. But some of these are larger stems like this stuff, this really large stem. Those are really, really chewy. They won't even go into a blender. So if you're like making a cilantro crema, we do a cilantro crema. That's where I picked up that hack. It doesn't even go through the blender correctly. They also contain a lot of water. So if you try and like chop this stuff up, you can even see as I like crunch it up, water starts coming out, which means that if you add it to something where you don't want extra water, say like a crema, for example, you would start shedding a whole bunch of water into the crema, and then you're gonna have a really watered down crema, which is not fun. We're doing our very best to try and remove as many of those stems as possible. But again, it comes down to how much how badly do you want to get those stems out? Sometimes I'll just forget about it and be lazy. So to each their own. Then, okay, so the last thing that we're going to do, I'm going to bunch this up and roll it into a really, really tight coil, like so, or like tight bunch, I guess. The goal here is to create as much like dense surface area in our cilantro so that we can chop through it. So if you've ever tried to chop through just a leaf of cilantro, you'll notice the knife doesn't really go through it. That's because it's too thin to chop through. But if you wrap it up really tightly into a bunch and then chop it, like so, you'll probably have a lot more luck. And then what we can do from there is, what I usually do is like to go through it twice and then go through a mince. For me personally, I like my cilantro to have some larger and some smaller edges. So usually I'll stop right there, and that's just going to leave some like larger edges to my cilantro. If you really want to, you can go through and do a fine mince. Or if you're absolutely committed, you could throw it into a food processor too, and it would do a little bit more of a like a completely macerated cilantro. But for me though, I like to have these little larger edges. But again, this is the reason why we want to pick those stems out, because nobody likes to get a cilantro stem in their garnish. All right, so there's our cilantro. That's purely going to be for our garnish, so that's going to be out in the hole until the very, very end. All right, next up, this is going to be 2 eggs that we're going to crack, whisk, and then set aside. We're going to add this. It's sort of like, this reminds me a lot of how you would do like a pad thai, or maybe like a pad see ew, any kind of Thai noodle, where you would see those noodles added really, really late. So we're going to add these at the very, very end, and we're going to go around the side of the wok, and that's going to do a couple of things. The first thing is it's going to create some nice egg curds for us once it sets. But the other thing that's really useful with it is that it's going to sort of like coat the eggs. So that's like if you've ever had pad thai and the noodles themselves are covered in a little bit of egg and it sort of like has egg sticking to it, that's how they do this. They add the eggs at the very, very end, and it goes around the wok, and then you get this nice egg coated noodle. So to me, that's kind of like a Thai thing to do, and not something that I have actually ever seen in Chinese cuisine. Even Chinese American cuisine. It's definitely not even an American thing. You lost this and found it again. I'm glad that you found it again. We're here by the way, we're here every Tuesday, 6:30 PST. So if you're looking for the stream, it's always here. Also, if you're looking for the schedule, there's a whole schedule of these live streams. They live over on the YouTube channel. So if you were watching on the YouTube channel, you would have known many, many weeks ago that we would be streaming this, because those are published every week. And that's also like a good way to know what is the next thing coming out on the YouTube channel. So every Friday we have a new recipe. Every Tuesday we're live streaming that recipe. So if you want to know what the recipe is going to be on Friday, look up the live stream. That's going to tell you. Did I chop everything? No, I forgot to do these. All right, next up is my shrimp. Coriander, yeah, I guess so, that too. Next up is my shrimp. These are frozen shrimp, which, by the way, I love. Shrimp poses several different problems. The first and most tricky part about it is that, number one, that they're like more expensive than they need to be, especially if you buy them fresh. But also, number two is that they also happen to freeze very, very well. In addition to that, on top of all of that, they're also very perishable if you buy them fresh. So like a fresh shrimp will really only have a shelf life of maybe a week. Even a week is kind of pushing it with fresh shrimp. In addition to that, though, they also freeze really well. So if you throw these into a freezer, I just had these sitting in a bowl of water. Wasn't even warm water, it was just cold water. And they defrosted within like 5 minutes. And they don't really lose much structure. They kind of just stick together a little bit and then just sort of come apart and defrost really well when you throw them in some water. So I stand by it. I think that if you're ever using shrimp, just use frozen shrimp because they freeze and defrost really, really well. Especially in stir fries. Yeah. So what I'm doing here is I'm just peeling off our shells. I know that lots of people like to leave the shells on of their shrimp in stir fries. That, by the way, also very helpful. If you throw shrimp into a stir fry, the shells will keep it from overcooking. because it's going to protect the shrimp from the aggressive wok heat, which is nice. I personally have a big gripe with eating shrimp with shells on them, because they're really annoying. You basically have to pick the shrimp out of the stir fry and then pull the shell off and then eat it, which is dumb. It just ruins the whole point of the stir fry. So to me, that's just a big pet peeve. I always peel my shrimp, and I wish that everybody else would too. Although I do know that it will lead to overcooked shrimp if you're not careful. So, yeah. Cool. This again, by the way, we're also doubling our recipe today. So if you're cooking based off of the original recipe, it should be about 4 shrimp. Today I think we're doing 6 or 8. 4 or 5. Yeah, 8. Yeah, 8 shrimp. Yeah, I think the original recipe calls for like 4 to 5 or something like that, though. So, to each their own. If you really like shrimp, throw a lot in. They are expensive, though. These shrimp shells, by the way, are really useful if you're interested in creating like a really umami-rich stock. That's also how like a lot of soup bases in Thai cuisine are created. So like tom yum soup and stuff like that. It's all made using shrimp shells. So if you're trying to create like a really good Thai soup, that's how they make that stuff. You can save those shells. I have not gotten around to doing that dish yet, so I usually just toss my shells, but that's just me. Alright, next up, what we're going to do, so we're getting out a paring knife for the first time in a while. And you'll notice at the bottom underside of our shrimp, there's this blue line. That's not just a vein, or I guess it's technically referred to as a vein, but it's not just a vein, that's actually their poop sac. So we want to get that vein out of the shrimp. Unless you like eating poop, you can leave it in. Technically, it's edible. It's not that big of a deal if you don't care. Some people will leave it in. Lots of people leave it in, actually. I feel like most Chinese restaurants will just leave this in because Chinese people don't give a shit. But I find it gross, and I am going to pick it out. I guess it's technically not poop. It's mostly like grime. It's like dirt and grime and stuff that the shrimp has eaten. So we, most of the time, gonna want to pick that out because it's kind of gross. Why do I want to get my hands dirty when you're already eating with a fork? Yeah, I agree. It's I feel like it's like kind of ruins the plan for like the whole dish. Then you kind of have to deal with the fact that there's a shrimp with a shell on it. That's not edible. So maybe in like a stir fry, like a honey walnut shrimp, I might understand leaving the shell on. But even then, we just did a honey walnut shrimp and I picked it out because it's annoying and I don't want to deal with it. Yeah. But yeah, it does protect the shrimp in the wok fry, so it will help keep the shrimp from overcooking. So trade-off, I guess. Also, there is no real way of deveining the shrimp that makes it any faster. It's just a kind of a slow and arduous process. What I always say is it's very meditative, so get some meditation going. But I am using a paring knife, and then we're basically pulling this vein out. I'm giving it a slice down its center, so I guess like that would be the belly, I guess. And that's going to just release that pink vein for you. There we go. The gabagoo, why am I taking out the gabagoo? Yeah, I guess if you don't mind it, you can absolutely leave it in. But that's poop, guys. You're eating poop. If you leave that thing in, you're eating poop. It's disgusting. Or maybe not. Each their own. Alright, last up we're going to do some chicken here. This is chicken thigh. You could also use chicken breast. I think in the original PF Chang's they do it with chicken breast. Or, I'm sorry, chicken thigh, I think. I actually don't remember. I just assumed they were using chicken thigh. I can't remember, though. Either way though, what I'm going to do is, because we're throwing this into a stir fry with a whole bunch of stuff, I find that it works really well when you have a lot of things in a dish like what we're doing today. It works really well to do a really fine chop, because it's just going to help sort of like reduce the noise of the thing that we're cooking today. That's going to be our chicken. So this is like almost like it's a fine mince, so like borderline mince. If you've ever had like in the States, you'll often see the terms minced meat and ground meat used interchangeably, when in reality they don't actually mean the same thing. Ground meat is like machine ground, whereas minced meat is literally minced meat that has been minced. That's essentially what we're going for. So if you've ever actually bought actually minced meat, not ground meat, but minced meat, that's sort of what I'm going for here, is that minced meat texture. Cool. Alright, so there's our chicken. I broke our designated chicken bowl, so we're going to have to use a stainless steel today. Today we're going to do a fairly simple marinade. The only additional thing that I'm adding is the hoisin sauce that we're about to include. But kicking things off, this is 4 tablespoons of sesame oil. All right. Next up, this is going to be 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. White pepper. There it is. Next, this is going to be half a table, or maybe about a teaspoon of white pepper. And yeah. Do I prefer minced or ground meat? Yeah. It kind of depends. It depends what I'm cooking. In like most contexts where in most contexts that call for ground meat, I want ground meat. Although I have used minced meat in certain occasions, but usually, because I guess it really depends on the context. There are plenty of scenarios where I very much prefer using minced, but for the most part, unless it's a very well minced meat, so if it's like from a butcher that I really trust and know that they're going to do a good job mincing that meat, otherwise I probably won't deal with it, because I find that like lots of times they won't chop it correctly, or just something has gone wrong and it's not quite the right texture, the chop isn't quite correct, and I would much rather just mince that stuff myself. Just use chicken and then mince it myself like we are doing right now. Chop their own ground meat from my chuck of meat. I have never actually done that before. I'm not that particular about those sorts of things. I also, am fortunate enough that there's a really good butcher down the street from me, so I can get pretty decent minced meat without trying too hard to find it. So, and also they sell it for stupid cheap too. So I think it's like $4 a pound for like minced pork, which is for like boutique minced pork, which is crazy. Although I do kind of wish I had like a meat grinder, but I don't. So. Yeah, but yeah, I feel like I might be the kind of person that would mince my own meat if I had it too. Although I have found that it is a really cool solution if you're like into sausage making, because you can adjust like fat content and that kind of stuff. It's also like really cool if you're like really into like making meatballs or like burger patties. You can adjust fat content, so you can like make an 80-20 beef chuck patty for your hamburgers, but that 20% can be pork fat instead, or you can like start combining stuff. You kind of do like crazy shit. Just get really creative with that sort of stuff. I have a friend that's really into grinding his own meat, which is cool. But I'm way too lazy to deal with that shit. All right, so next up, this is some vermicelli. This, by the way, is 300 grams or 10.5 ounces of vermicelli. So if that seems like a weird and really obnoxious number of ounces, that's because it is a really obnoxious number. Most of the time in the States, when you order pastas or when you buy packs of pasta, it's probably going to be sold, or should be sold, in a relatively even number of ounces, so something that rounds evenly. For the same reason, most of the time pasta recipes are written to accommodate for the fact that they know what quantity of pasta you're buying. So usually, at least here in the States, that's going to be either 8 ounces or 16 ounces. Sometimes you'll see 12 ounces, but that's a really obnoxious recipe if you're calling for 12 ounces. You will never ever see anyone call for 10.5 ounces of noodles. And that's because if you use 10.5 ounces of noodles from a 16-ounce pack of pasta, then you're going to have a weird 4.5 ounces of noodles left that you won't have anything to do with. So most of the times recipes will accommodate for that fact and write the recipe around the fact that you're using a consistent amount of noodles, so you don't have a weird amount of noodles left in your packet. Vermicelli, on the other hand, like what we're cooking right now, is generally sold in grams. So when you see in our original recipe, it calls for, I think like, I forget, I think it was like 11 ounces of noodles. The reason that it says that is because when you buy vermicelli, you're not gonna find it in ounces. You'll find it in grams. So don't be weirded out by the fact that I'm calling for like 10.5 ounces of noodles or something. That's because it should be measured in grams. Ooh, our camera's gonna fog out. What I'm doing right now, so this is our dried vermicelli. I just dropped it into a bowl and then I added some boiling water, which is why our camera is fogging up right now. It's because that steam is hitting the camera lens. Vermicelli is a really, really delicate noodle, so we don't want to drop this into a boiling water like you would do with like vermicelli, fettuccine or like spaghetti, stuff like that, where that stuff will take like 8-10 minutes to cook. In this boiling water, these noodles will probably be done cooking in about 3-4 minutes. So if we threw them in a pot of rolling water that was boiling, that would overcook really quickly. Your mom minces their own meat when they make pork dumplings. Yeah, that's a lot of work. Because if you're making dumplings, that's already a lot of work. Which means that if you're also mincing the pork, man, you got to be standing there mincing pork for like a couple hours. And then on top of that, you're also making the dumplings. I don't know. Would I want to be unchopped? I think there's like a lot of I looked into it. I think there's a lot of requirements to getting unchopped. I think you have to have gone to culinary school. I looked into it, and for whatever, I forget why, but for whatever reason, I don't think that I'm qualified. But that would be cool. I also don't think that I have nearly what it takes to be unchopped, because I think Unchopped and all of those like food cooking shows, you have to be like a really, really well-rounded chef. So you have to be able to cook everything. And I don't necessarily consider myself to be a really well-rounded chef. I think that I cook like one or like a narrow field of like, call it like pan-Asian cuisine pretty well. But like outside of that, I don't like have a lot of experience cooking European cuisine. Most American cuisine I'm fairly comfortable with, but like most French and Italian, I guess like Italian cuisine I'm relatively comfortable with, but like most French cuisine, I don't really have a lot of experience with that. Mexican food, or I should say like Hispanic food in general, like takes me way out of my comfort zone. So I definitely have a comfort zone where I'm comfortable cooking. That's usually the things that I write recipes for. definitely like baking is way outside of my area of expertise. So, and I think like with chopped, you have to be a pretty well-rounded chef. That's not me. I'm not a well-rounded chef at all. Just the one thing. Cool. But if somebody asked me to be on Chopped, I would probably give it a shot, and then I would make a big old fool of myself. But that would still be really cool, though. Where's our autofocus square there? Go away. There we go. All right. Yeah, that would be a crazy opportunity, though. So next up, I'm assembling my sauce here. We're gonna deglaze our pan after searing that chicken in a minute. So we're gonna be using like a relatively like simple sauce base here, because most of what we're getting out of our sauce is going to be deglazing the fat from our chicken. We're gonna get a little brine from our shrimp too. You can't bake, is that an Asian thing? Baking is like a very common thing in Asian cuisine. I think, like, to me, the reason that baking is so problematic for like my particular like skill set is because the way that I think about cooking is very improvisatory. So the way that wok cooking is like, you can write a recipe for a wok cook, but for the most part, you kind of have to just feel your way through it and like have a really fundamental understanding of how the dish works. But from there, you just have to have like a feel. So you kind of have to feel. Whereas like baking is really just about following the recipe and like sticking to it. And if something goes wrong, you pretty much just have to restart it, because like if you proof a dough incorrectly, you basically have to restart, and that's like 5 hours wasted. So to me, that's like where I fuck up baked recipes all the time. It's just the fact that I like not super great at following recipes. As you'll notice, we're measuring tablespoons with spoons. Case in point. But yeah, to answer your question, I don't think it's an Asian thing, because there's a lot of like popular Asian baked goods, some of which we sell in our pop-up, and it's like one of the few things that I'm like pretty good at baking. One of those happens to be the tassi bao that we just did a recipe for not too long ago, which is like a barbecue baked pork bun. All right, so that's our sauce. That was, by the way, I just talked my way through the whole thing. But that was 4 tablespoons of soy sauce, 2 tablespoons of oyster sauce, and then a single tablespoon of Shaoxing wine, which is Chinese cooking wine, and then a single tablespoon of doubanjiang, which is like a chili paste, so it's like a hot sauce. That's going to be where all of our heat comes from today, which is to say not very much heat. So the dish itself is not going to have much heat, but I do think that it needs a little bit something, because otherwise it's going to sort of fall flat, and that 1 tablespoon of doubanjiang is going to do the whole thing for us. All right, I'm going to get my wok going. We're going to heat that up, and then we're going to start off by searing our chicken next. Baguette, yeah, exactly. French food is really tricky. Cool, hello to everyone just tuning in. My name is Wesley, this is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time catching one of these streams, we're here every Tuesday at 6:30 PST with new recipes on my YouTube channel every Friday. So last Friday we came out with a recipe for the Singapore noodle that we're cooking right now, which is loosely inspired by the version found at PF Chang's, which is part of this whole series that we've been doing, where we've been reproducing a lot of dishes that come from the PF Chang's menu. We've now done, I think, like 5 or 6 different things that come from the PF Chang's menu, which has been really interesting and like educating, because to me, things like PF Chang's and Panda Express and Chinese American cuisine in general just doesn't really have a lot of context in Chinese food. So when we try and reproduce it through the lens of like Chinese cooking, that's really weird and interesting, because it's kind of like shoving a bunch of Chinese things into what's really just an American dish. So if you're interested in stuff like that, definitely head over to the YouTube channel, check out what's going on over there. Those are out every Friday, and then usually on Tuesdays we're going to be cooking through those dishes. So this is one of them. We're working our way up to 6,500 subscribers by the end of the month, so if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, please bop over and subscribe. Only if you're interested. Don't do it if you're not interested. I don't know why people do that. Yeah. Do I like spicy food? I do, but I don't love it the way that lots of people like love spicy food. Like they like to suffer through their spiciness. I like the taste of food. I enjoy spice, but I don't like to just be like smacked in the face with spice though. Good question though. All right, kicking things off. So this is going to be 4 tablespoons. I believe we're using grapeseed oil now. It's not going to be too much oil, mostly because our chicken itself is going to kick off a lot of oil. The other thing that we want to remember is that our chicken is marinating in a very liquidy substance, so that's mostly soy sauce. So as it goes into our wok, you want to be careful. We're adding it very, very gently because if you toss that in too fast, you're going to kick a whole bunch of liquid into the wok with it, and that's going to sputter. So anytime that you release liquid into hot oil, that's how you get sputtering. Oil in your face, stuff like that. That's how you end up with oil burn. So we want to be really careful, especially when we're working with chicken that's being marinated in a liquid. When we add that to the wok, add it very, very gently, or else you're going to splash oil everywhere, and you're going to have a bad time. So I'm adding that's adding to our wok, and then I'm spreading it out a little bit, and we're going to let this sear for about 2 minutes. So I'm just doing my best. It's not a perfect scenario. If we were really committed, we could add this one piece at a time. And essentially what we're trying to do is make sure that as much chicken as possible gets nice contact with the surface of the wok. In this scenario, I'm not going to take the time to add this one piece at a time because we just fine minced that chicken, which is going to take way too long to add one piece at a time. But we're doing our very, very best to make sure that as much of it as possible is making contact with that wok surface, because anything that's not touching the wok surface is not going to sear. So the more chicken that we get in touch with that wok surface, the more crispy edges and like seared and like browning we're going to be able to get. The less that's making contact, the more of it is going to just start steaming, which is not good. Well, hello, yeah, hello, intelligent honey. I see a lot of usernames with 2 random words stuck together. I think that's weird and interesting. Cool, so I'm going to let that sear. We're going to let that go for 2.5 minutes before we start tossing it. Every maybe 20 seconds or so, I'm going to go through and I'm rotating the wok in a little bit of a circle like this. Because we're working in this round bottom wok, you'll notice if I don't rotate the wok, the oil just stays in one place. It kind of just stays right here, which means this chicken on the outside edge right here is not really getting very much oil connected to it. And if there's no oil, that's how you end up with burnt chicken. So we want to make sure as we're cooking that we just sort of give the wok a little bit of a rotation so that stuff on the exterior edges also gets cooked correctly. Yeah. Ooh, well, there's our 2 minutes. Yeah. Ooh, I think I just spilled some chicken. Let's fish that out. By the way, is the problem with going for wok on a home range. That can happen. Wok, by the way, is the process of essentially what we're trying to do is catch parts of the chicken on fire. And the way that we do that on wok burners is because on wok burners, also in commercial restaurants too, the BTU output of those burners is kicking up really, really high. So if you tilt the wok a little bit to the edge, you'll notice that the chicken fat is sort of like coming over to the edge. So what you can do if the fire is kicking up high enough, set that fat on fire, and that's how you get that nice big flame and that really cool look. That's very photogenic. The problem is when you're on a home range like this burner obviously is not kicking up very high, which makes it a lot harder to get that wok heavy because you're not going to be able to catch the fat on fire as easily. When we're on those wok burners, it's pretty easy. You kind of just turn the wok to its side a little bit, and then that fat will immediately catch on fire because the fire is kicking up so high already. At home though, it's a little bit more tricky, and if you're not careful, you'll end up doing what I just did, and you'll dump half the chicken out on the stove range, which is not what we're going for. All right. So the last thing that I'm going to do before I pull this chicken out is we're going to add our shrimp. Where's our shrimp? But we're going to do it really, really briefly. Shrimp cooks really, really fast. So I'm going to add it. We're going to give it a toss for about 10 seconds. And then immediately pull it out. The shrimp does not need to be long in the wok, otherwise it will overcook really fast. That's going to do it. That shrimp probably not cooked all the way through yet, but it's going to have quite a bit of residual and carryover cook, so I'm perfectly okay with taking that out right now. Then next, here's our sauce element going in. What I usually like to do is add a little bit of water with that. This is going to be about, it might be almost a half a cup of water there. And then what we're going to do, also by the way, if you have it, probably the more traditional thing to do is do that with chicken stock. I don't have any chicken stock right now because it's frozen and I forgot to defrost it. But what we're doing is essentially just sort of deglazing all of this fat that has and fond that has sort of stuck to the bottom of our wok during that sear. So we're getting this nice deglaze going here. Out of bowls. You wish you had a man who can cook as well. Yeah, thank you. That's cool. Me too. All right, so I'm pulling our sauce base out. It should look more or less like a chicken stock at this point, or like a stock base at this point, because we have just deglazed a whole bunch of stuff off of our wok surface. That is now infused into our woks, into our sauce base, which is what we're going for here. Then what I'm going to do, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm basically just throwing that back on the fire. I think we can, because we just deglazed, I think in a scenario like this you might be able to get away without rinsing the wok. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave it on the fire and we're going to let that cook off all of that moisture that's left behind. And then once it's nice and dry, we can start our wok fry here. So in a lot of me rinse the wok up, basically clean the wok and then restart. In those scenarios, basically what we're doing is cleaning off any residual debris. In this particular scenario, I don't think that we need to do that because we just deglazed all of that debris off of our wok into our surface, into our sauce already. So I think we should be able to get away without doing that. So here's that's another 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, and then 1 more long yao, and then going in first. Here's our aromatics. Our garlic, followed by our ginger. Then next I'm moving everything to one side, and then we're going to add our curry powder. So this, by the way, is the part that reminds me most of a chow mein, is the fact that we're adding a aromatic seasoning to our sauce base. 3 tablespoons of curry powder, and then what I like to do is add a little bit of turmeric to just sort of give the final dish that little bit of extra color. Curry powder, as you might notice, already contains turmeric, so you technically don't have to use turmeric because it's in the curry powder already. That's part of the spice blend. It's sort of like what makes curry powder that color. So you don't have to, if you don't have turmeric, you can get away without using it. But I like to add it, and basically what we're doing is trying to make sure that those powdered spices are making good solid contact with the wok surface here. All right, next up here are noodles going in. So I'm giving these a real good toss to combine. We're letting that curry powder just sort of incorporate. All right, so at this point, if we were cooking in a restaurant, we would pretty much just keep plowing forward. We would have a really big wok and then just sort of continue to cook. So I would just keep adding stuff to our wok here. In our particular case right now, because we're on a home range, it's really important that we start removing stuff from the wok because if we leave stuff in the wok at this point, the temperature of the wok is just going to keep dropping. So if I started adding our vegetables next, we would end up with like undercooked vegetables because they would be cooking on medium heat. So as we cook, I'm going to keep removing stuff. So that was our noodles, we just pulled it out. Then we're going to stir fry our veggies and then we're going to add everything back to the wok from there. And that's just sort of helping us make sure that we can cook everything on extremely high heat without losing that heat retention because of the home range burner. You screw up mac and cheese? Oh, nobody can screw up mac and cheese. Because mac and cheese is delicious even when you screw it up. Yeah, you can make instant mac on the pot though. That's the best way to do it. I think like easy mac is technically the easy mac is the kind that you make in a microwave. Kraft Blue Box, that's the stuff that you make on a stovetop. The white melty mac and cheese, yeah, exactly. Right, so next up we're moving on to our veggies here. I'm going to give a head start, pretty decent head start at least, to our bell peppers because those bell peppers will take a decent bit longer than our onions to cook here. So I'm going to let those go for a solid 2-3 minutes before moving on and adding our onions in. And then what we're going to do is we want to leave those onions pretty late into the wok cook because once those onions go in, they can really only be on heat for a couple of minutes. After that, they start losing their texture and you start ending up with like caramelized onions, which is sort of like a mushy onion. That's not really what we're going for here. We want our onions to be like 40% still raw. So that's the sort of like quality of stir-fried onions that you'll probably know from like most wok fries. But the bell pepper, on the other hand, is a little bit more of a resilient vegetable, so we want to give that a little bit of a head start so that it doesn't undercook. Yeah, the instant kind, yeah. There it goes. Yeah. So at this point, by the way, if you were following the recipe, I believe it also calls for carrots and cabbage. This would be the point where we would add those extra veggies. So essentially what we're doing is we're timing out our veggies so that they cook at the appropriate amount of time. The bell pepper is going to take the longest. Following after that would have been the cabbage and julienne carrots. And the last one that we're going to add are our onions because they take the least amount of time. So it's about now. Add a little bit more onion because I feel like that's not quite enough onion. Did I use sesame oil? Yeah, it was in the it was in our chicken marinade, I think. The sesame oil was in the chicken marinade. Lately, I've been noticing that their stir fries have like too many sauces in it, and I've been trying to like pare down the amount of things that go into our sauces because, well, for starters, it makes it a little bit easier to cook. But also, I don't think that you necessarily need that many ingredients. If you're using that many things, you're probably overdoing it. So I've been trying and like working on using fewer ingredients in our stir fries. So partially because it helps make it a little bit more approachable, but also partially because I actually don't think that you need to use that many things. So here's our noodles going back in, followed finally by our proteins. So there's our shrimp and chicken. Next up, here's our sauce base. At this point, now that everything is in the wok, we're going to start running into heat retention issues. So you'll notice that as soon as I added those noodles back to the wok, basically, our wok stopped sizzling. So if you ever at any point, if you're still cooking and your wok stops sizzling, you lose that sizzle. That's a bad sign. It means that you're cooking on insufficient heat. So at pretty much all times, unless you're done cooking, the only scenario that you should hear your wok stop sizzling is if you're done cooking. Otherwise, it should pretty much always be sizzling, like so. Alright, last up, here's our eggs going in. I'm going to use 3 eggs. This might not be enough eggs. I'll use some more eggs here. Oh, you know why? It's because I was supposed to double it. I'm going to add a couple more eggs because this feels like not enough eggs. Oh, to coat the wok. You mean to coat the wok? Yeah. What we're using right now is grapeseed oil. Probably like the most traditional thing to use would be peanut oil. That's probably like the most common thing to use in wok frying. I have been trending away from using peanut oil, mostly because it's a real single-use oil. So it's basically like only usable if you're stir frying. So if you're doing anything other than stir frying, you're probably not going to want to use peanut oil. Whereas grapeseed oil is a pretty neutral, very, very neutral oil, which means that you could use it for anything. You could use it for hash browns, you could use it for wok frying, you could probably get away with cooking most Italian food in it, although you probably should be using olive oil. So in terms of like when I stock oils, I'm more concerned about making sure that I have grapeseed oil in stock, and then like after that is usually going to be olive oil, and then third after that is going to be peanut oil. So I just haven't gotten around to replacing the peanut oil. But generally, when we're using sesame oil, because sesame oil is a really expensive oil, that's generally going to be used in seasoning. So things like Today we use that in a marinade. Stuff like that. Anywhere where we're gonna taste it. Eggs, yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally. No worries. Yeah, so that's why you'll notice, like, when you buy sesame oil, it's sold in like much smaller quantities. So it'll probably be sold in like 8 to 10 ounces. It's because it's meant for like cooking and like to be used in tablespoons. We don't want to be using it for like stir frying and like frying eggs in and stuff, because it's a really expensive oil and not necessary. I think like when I buy it in Chinatown, it's like $6 for like 8 or 10 ounces, which is really expensive. To put it in perspective, the 64-ounce bottle of grapeseed oil that I'm cooking with was like, I think, the same price. All right, so last up, we're just letting those eggs set, and we should be good to go. I'm actually going to go ahead and kill the heat because I think we're just about there. You'll also notice that our shrimpers have cooked all the way through at this point, which is to say they cook very quickly on very delicate heat, which is, I think it was we did about 10 seconds in the wok fry, and then the rest of it just happened on residual heat. Most of it, I think, cooked off heat, in fact. Ooh, yeah, that's good. Ooh, yeah, that's really good. So the last thing that we want to do anytime that we're cooking in a wok is we want to give it a good rinse when we're done cooking. I especially do this when I'm cooking things that contain eggs. So that's usually like pad thai, pad see ew, pad khee mao, stuff that contains egg. Anything that I'm stir frying in egg. Pancake flour, all of that egg coating, it has a tendency to stick to the wok, so we want to clean that immediately. Because while the wok is hot, you're going to have a little bit more ease in getting all of that crap off the wok. If you go and sit down, eat stuff, and then come back and try and clean your wok, you're going to have to do a lot more work to get that thing clean. How many people am I cooking for? Yeah, I'm cooking for 3 people right now. So, 4 people, excuse me. I've been cooking for my neighbors lately, so they're really cool. I also walk their dog. Cool. So very important when you're done cooking. You'll notice that took me, I don't know, that took like 30 seconds, maybe less. Very important when you're done cooking. Clean the wok before you leave, because if we go and sit down and then come back and try and clean that, the eggs will set. The oils and the grime will start sticking to the wok. You're going to have to start getting steel wool out. You're going to do a lot more work to get that wok clean if you sit down and try and clean it then after you finish eating. Yeah, rainwoods. Yeah. So the worst part for me, I totally feel that is like by far the worst part is always cleaning the dishes afterwards. Which I don't have a camera over the sink, but you'll notice usually if I'm ever not doing something, what I'm doing while I'm like not cooking or just like waiting for things to set, is I'm probably washing a dish. So at the end of we just finished cooking, we used like 6 or 7 bowls and a wok and the strainer and a whole bunch of shit. It's all cleaned already because I was cleaning while I was cooking. I think that's like like the big secret to cooking without having to deal with all of the pain in the ass of all the other shit. After you finish cooking is cleaning, is to clean while you cook, and it will save you a lot of trouble. Alright, so I'm finishing this with a little bit of cilantro here. And that's going to do it. Yeah, hopefully that helps. I find that like it makes cooking a little bit more approachable. Is that if you don't have to deal with doing the dishes afterward, or at least doing a lot of dishes, that makes it a little bit less intimidating. That was one of the like early lessons I learned early on. Is that clean while you cook, and then you don't have to do an hour of dishes after you finish doing an hour of cooking. Yeah, that's definitely true. Cleaning while it's hot is only true, not just for woks, but only true for things like carbon steel and cast iron. You 100% do not want to do that with a non-stick pan because you'll crack the non-stick surface. And you could break a pan by doing that with a non-stick pan, which I've done when I was in college. I did that before. So definitely don't try and do that with a non-stick. Anything with Teflon, that's not going to work. That is literally only true for carbon steel, and you could do it with cast iron too. I do that with cast iron all the time. And I feel like you can do it, actually I don't think that's true. I think you can do that with stainless steel too. But really I only do that with the wok. Don't do that with, definitely do not do that with non-stick. Even a non-stick wok. Cool. There we go. Yeah, that's really pretty. Cool. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in. My name is Wesley. This is Woo Can Cook. If this is your first time tuning in, we're here at every Tuesday at 6:30 PST cooking through. Usually we're going to be cooking through recipes that have just come out on the YouTube channel. So last Friday we came out with the recipe for this Singapore noodle, which is inspired by the one found at PF Chang's. Those are out every Friday. So this Friday coming up is going to be a recipe for honey walnut shrimp, which is also based off of one found at Panda Express, I believe. But we did a whole bunch of weird shit to it that makes it completely unrecognizable from the one found at Panda Express. We did still use the tempura batter, and we did still use honey walnut shrimp, or honey walnuts and shrimp. But after that, we went way off the deep end. So it's actually really, really delicious, but not like any honey walnut shrimp that you've ever had, because it has a whole bunch of other weird shit in it. It does still have mayo in it though, so it's still relatively close to the original. But if you're looking for that stuff, it always lives over on the YouTube channel. So if you're watching on Reddit, that's the YouTube channel at the bottom of the screen. If you're watching on YouTube, that's the channel that you're already on. We're working our way up to 6,500 subscribers by the end of the month. So if you want to help us hit our subscriber goal, we're getting pretty close. So hop over and give it a subscribe. Feed Ham Chow. He's very hungry. Put that stuff in 4K and you got, yeah, 4K. I think that's like, also like, by the way, if you're watching on the YouTube channel, we're taking tips and donations. I never ask for money to stream. I don't really care about getting paid to stream. I usually just do it for fun. But I'm actively trying to upgrade the equipment that we're using. So you'll notice that that's a really shitty camcorder. And the one behind it is literally an iPhone. And if you could kind of see down here, this is a DSLR. Which is the nicer camera, but it's a really, really shitty DSLR. It's a T6, which is like a 10-year-old DSLR that I got for like $200. So I am always actively trying to upgrade the equipment that is used in these live streams. And the main thing that I'm trying to upgrade is this camera right now, which is stupid expensive. 4K cameras are insanely expensive. They're like $2,500. So right now I'm trying to get some money together to buy a new camera so that this is less blurry, which I do realize on both streams is very blurry. So if you want to help me pay for that equipment, head over to the YouTube channel and there's a donate link over there, which is streamlabs.com/woocancook. Lots of cool stuff. Cool. All right, thanks everyone. I'll see you soon. Head over to the YouTube channel, check out what's going on. Our new recipe's coming out Friday. By the way, if you're looking for it, so every Friday is the long form recipe, every Monday is the short form recipes. Those are the ones that you usually find on gift recipes if you're following from there. And every Wednesday there's new music out. So that's the Woo Cooks Beats stuff, basically all of the music that's under my voiceover right now, and all of the stuff that I'm about to play as soon as I say bye. Cool. So all that stuff every week over on the YouTube channel. See you soon. Bye.
Tastes like strawberries on a summer evening, and it sounds just like a song. I want more berries and that summer feeling. It's so wonderful and warm. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without. the end of June. I want your belly and that summer feeling, getting washed away in you. Breathe me in, breathe me out. I don't know if I could ever go without watermelon sugar high, 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 watermelon sugar high. I just wanna taste ya, I just wanna taste ya, watermelon sugar high.
If it bothers me and I'm feeling unhappy, I just try and think of nice things like pineapple. Well, let me see, nice things. Daffodils, green meadows, raindrops on roses, whiskers on kittens, cream-colored ponies and crisp apple strudels, doorbells and sleigh bells and schnitzel with noodles, wild geese that fly with the moon on their wings. These are a few of my favorite things. Girls in white dresses with blue satin sashes, snowflakes that stay on my nose and eyelashes, silver white winters that melt into springs. These are a few of my favorite things. When the dog bites, when the bee stings, when I'm feeling sad, I simply remember my favorite things, and then I don't feel so bad.
Well, good for you, I guess you moved on really easily. You found a new girl and it only took a couple weeks. Remember when you said that you wanted to give me the world? And good for you, I guess that you've been working on yourself. I guess the therapist I found for you should really help. Now you can be a better man for your brand new girl. Well, good for you, you look happy and healthy. Not me, if you ever cared to ask. Good for you, you're doing great out there without me, baby. God, I wish that I could do that. I've lost my mind, I've spent the night crying on the floor of my bedroom. But you're so affected, I really don't get it. But I guess good for you.
Smooth like butter, like a criminal undercover. Don't pop like trouble, breaking into your heart like that. Cool shade stunner, yeah, owe it all to my mother. Hot like summer, yeah, I'm making you sweat like that. Ooh, when I look in the mirror, I'm not too hard to do. I got the superstar glow, so ooh, to the boogie line. A side step right left to my beat. I like the moon rock with me, baby. Know that I got that heat. Let me show you, can't stop, can't ship. Side step right left to my beat. Can't let it flow.
Closed off from love, I didn't need the pain. Once or twice was enough, and it was all in vain. Time starts to pass before you know it, you're frozen. Ooh. But something happened for the very first time with you. My heart melted to the ground, found something true. And everyone's looking round, thinking I'm going crazy.
forever.